Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. My name is George Sirois. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 65. It has been an incredible run so far. I've had the privilege of speaking with over 60 creative people and allowing them to share the journey of their personal success. And there's no sign of slowing down. In fact, things are just going to keep getting better. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Just go to he'sgotit.com/Excelsior Journeys. And you'll see all 12 platforms where you can find the show. Also, on the same page, you'll see a link to the guest application for those of you who want to share your own Excelsior journey. And you'll also see a link to the sponsorship application for those of you who would like to support the show that features so many inspiring stories, many of which you're hearing on a podcast for the very first time, mind you. Now, starting in 2021, if you would like to be a supporter of Excelsior Journeys, you can sponsor a show for just $20 or a full month of shows for only $50. And your contributions go toward covering the monthly Zoom costs, monthly Podbean housing costs, annual website costs, and other show-related expenses. And your help is so appreciated. And in return, any information that you can provide to me about your product or your service, it's going to be read over the air before the beginning of the main interview. Now, for those of you who have been listening to and enjoying Excelsior Journeys, and for that I really thank you, you know that several months ago, I had the privilege of speaking with Tales from the Crypt and Superman Returns producer Gilbert Adler. It was a major highlight for this show, and I learned so much about the man and his decades of work as a producer, writer, and director. I had no idea that a couple months later, Gilbert would invite me to moderate a Q&A at a screenwriting conference called ScriptCom. And we went on to have a really good time, both revisiting the stories that he told on our earlier episode and getting other screenwriters of all different levels involved in the fun as well. So thank you so much to event director Jeff Chase for allowing me to repurpose the audio from this event. And once again, I have to thank you, Gilbert, for thinking of me and letting me ride along. Now we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you're going to hear me introduce Gilbert Adler to the panel. And I have a feeling that this may not be the last time I'll be introducing him at an event. Time will tell. We'll be right back. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me, George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today. First of all, hello everyone. I hope you guys have been having a great time this whole event. Thank you so much to Jeff for bringing us on. Thank you to Gilbert for having me come in to be your interviewer for this segment. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know me, which is likely all of you, my name is George Sirois. I am not only a podcaster, host, and producer of the podcast Excelsior Journeys and also the limited series podcast From Dusk Till Dark outside the Marvel Studios, which celebrates all of the Marvel films that are outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm also an author of 2 young adult sci-fi novels with a 3rd one on its way and a complete 5-part sci-fi serial. And I also served as president of the Missouri Writers Guild from 2017 to 2018. But enough about me. You are here to learn from producer, writer, director Gilbert Adler, and I am so thrilled that you guys get to interact with Gilbert, because having interviewed him a couple of months ago, it was one of my favorite episodes. I'm not just saying that because he's right here, but it really was so much that I got to learn from him, and also get to hear his story, which you're going to be hearing a lot of today. Gilbert is a triple threat. The man is a producer, a writer, and a director. He knows film, he knows theater, he knows television. He is an ideal person to learn from when it comes to what the people in this industry are looking for. And so it is my privilege to introduce to you all Gilbert Adler. Gil, how are you?
Nice to meet you all. I'm glad to be here, and happy to begin and start. And I started my career in theater in New York, off Broadway, off Broadway, and then Broadway. Basically did some theater, went to Edinburgh, did a play there, did a play in London, found a play in London, brought it to New York, called El Grande de Coca-Cola. It ran for 5 years, and probably is the reason why I'm even here talking to you today. Had that not been successful, I don't want to think about that. But that was the beginning of it. So I started out in theater. I started out in music. I answered an ad in the New York Times at one point in my life, and it led to me being the director of grants for the New York State Council on the Arts when Kitty Carlisle Hart was the chairman. And so I was involved with governmental agency and governmental distribution of funds for the arts all over the state of New York. But that didn't really appeal to me. It was very administrative. I really wanted to be involved in the development and in the production of it. And so after Coca-Cola was a big hit, I did a few more plays, some concerts at Carnegie Hall, and then moved into film and television. And so I stop there, and you want to grill me a little bit?
From what I remember, from our conversation, you started working with HBO for quite a while during the 80s, correct?
Yeah. What happened was Chris Albrecht was running HBO at the time, and when I knew him was before that, when he was an agent at ICM, and I would be this kid coming out from New York looking to get a job, do something in film and television, and Chris actually thought, maybe there was something here, and gave me an opportunity. And so initially I came up to Vancouver, oddly enough, and did a show called The Hitchhiker, and then became a guy that HBO would go to when they had problems. So they were shooting a show that won some ACE Awards. In those days, there were ACE Awards in Savannah, Georgia. And so I flew to Savannah, Georgia, because they had shot 4 days and they only had 2 days in the can. And he said to me, could you come and fix it and take it over and do whatever you have to do? And so we ran to Savannah literally overnight and took over the show and made it work, and came in and did what needed to be done to get it done. And so I had a rapport and relationship with Chris. And with Tales from the Crypt, one day Chris called me and he said, listen, I need you to meet with Joel Silver, Dick Donner, Bob Zemeckis, Walter Hill. And I said, oh, I could do that. And he said, yeah, they've shot 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, and they're way over budget, and we have problems, and they're not going to write me a check, and it's a successful show. The audience is there. We won't do it unless we figure out how to make up the money. And I trust you would figure it out, and yet keep the quality of the show at the level that you keep the things that you produce at that level, which is always my mantra. And so I came in there and I looked at the 3 episodes, had a meeting with them, and I said, look, if you remember the first 3 episodes, the Crypt Keeper was very inaccessible. He was very darkly lit. He was not a nice guy. He was a threat. And I thought that was all wrong. I thought the show should be the threat. We should scare you. It should be titillating. It should be sexy. It should be funny. And it should be dark. But at the end of the show, the Crypt Keeper should come back on and say, you can go to sleep now. You don't have to look under the bed. Everything is cool. We're just having some fun. And the other thing I said, so I want to make him different characters. I don't want him to keep in a dark lit in a shroud. I want him to be a chiropractor. I want him to run for president. I want him to be the Beatles. I want him to be whatever I can come up with. And secondly, I said the comic books were from the 50s. And so if you read the comic book, by the time you get to the second panel, you know the entire story. Mm-hmm. And I said, you can't do that today. You need to have more intrigue in the storytelling, and you have to keep an audience active in figuring out what's happening. So I would take the title and I would glean something from the comic book. Maybe it's an effect, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's the way someone got killed or almost got killed, or what the twist would be. I'd throw everything else out, and we would rewrite or write a story that would make sense for an audience, a contemporary audience. And the third thing I said, what I wanted to do is I would want to go after stars. So they said to me, and I said, look, if you don't like these three ideas, that's cool, but I'm the wrong guy. If you like these three ideas and I can do that, I'm the right guy. And, I had done 44 hours of Freddy's Nightmares for Lorimar and New Line Cinema before that, where we were shooting 10 pages a day. So I'll never forget, Joel said to me, you have to shoot 5 pages a day, every day in and day out. And it's got to look like a motion picture. It can't look like crappy television. And I looked at him and I said, what do we do after lunch? And I said, because I've been shooting 10 pages a day. And that sort of clinched it for him. And that's how we got into Tales from the Crypt. And on Freddy's, I produced all those. And eventually they asked me to write some. And that led to, me taking a stab at writing. So I'm not the kind of guy that got into writing and directing and became a producer. I went the other way. And really became a director because I was writing 2 episodes of Freddy's a season, producing all the 22 hours, and they couldn't get me any more money. So they said, well, we can get you more money if you direct an episode. So there I was. I became a Directors Guild member, and I started directing. And then when we got to Tales, similar thing happened. I was producing all the shows, and then they said, well, why don't you write one? And they liked the one I wrote, and I directed it. And they said, well, you should write and direct more. So Alan Katz and I were partners, and we were writers, and we wrote all the episodes that I directed, and we wrote all the episodes that Bob Zemeckis directed as well.
Now, you had mentioned Freddy's Nightmares, which is something I definitely wanted to touch on, because it seemed like, from what I understand, not only you but a lot of other crew members from Tales from the Crypt really kind of came aboard after cutting their teeth on Freddy's Nightmares. Now that was a show where Bob Shea from New Line Cinema basically said anyone who wanted to direct one could direct one, anyone who wanted to write one could write one. So it seemed like it was almost like not kind of like a minor league kind of thing, but basically like a way for people to really kind of get in and get themselves situated. Do you think that there are any shows that are out there right now that have that sort of philosophy, or do you think that that time is pretty much past?
I think it might be for actors. I see a lot of actors directing some of their episodes of their shows, their regulars in the show. I don't think there's that opportunity any longer for that kind of thing. When we did Freddy's, the first season, we did 22 hours, and they came and they said, you have to write them so that we can break them into 2 half-hour shows, because in Europe we want to sell them as 2 half-hour shows or as an hour. So we had to write them that way. The second year they came back and they said, yeah, we still want them to work as half-hour shows. We want them to work as an hour show, but we also would like to gang up 2 of them at a time and make them into little movies. So 2 episodes would equal a movie. So we had to write them as half hours, as hours, and as 2 hours. And I don't think that could happen today in the time that we had, because we shot Freddy's in 5 days. And on day 6, we didn't have a writing day or an off day. Day 6 started the next episode, and we went 22 episodes straight for the season.
And so during that, one of the things that I really found really interesting about Freddy's Nightmares during that time was that Freddy was kind of acting the same way that the Crypt Keeper would later on, but there were certain episodes where Freddy himself would actually be involved in the episode.
Yes.
How did those particular episodes come about?
It was intentional. I mean, when we got to the writing room, we talked to Robert Englund, who was Freddy Krueger and probably still does a lot of Freddy Krueger promotion these days. He's a fantastic actor and a really good friend. Oh, yeah. And he wanted to be involved more. And so we said, well, we can make that happen if everyone agrees. Lorimar and New Line want to make that happen. They said, yeah, if you can. So we were very careful to use him judiciously because we didn't want to use up the franchise because the movies were still happening.
Right. Yeah, that was during the time, I think, between 4 and 5, I think, of the Elm Street films. So yeah. You had also mentioned how you had gotten into writing. Was it, like when you were getting in there with your partner Alan Katz, did it feel like you kind of had, had an advantage because you had gone through all the time as a producer, so you got to see like what it is that the different studios are looking for?
I was scared as hell.
Yeah.
I was really frightened about the writing, and equally frightened when I started to direct, because with writing, you look at a blank screen, and even your checkbook looks interesting to balance. Mm-hmm. When that blank screen is looking back at you. So what Alan and I did, we really acted everything out in our office. That's why it worked so well, because we could act. He and I were like never really at our computers. We were jumping around the room, acting out and talking the dialogue and speak. And then one of us would run to the computer and jot it down. That was good. That's a good line. No, that's a shitty line. That's a good line. And so we would do that. And so that's how the writing started. And it was exciting for me because it really was exciting to get to writing these characters. And really what I wanted to do, I've always had a mantra in my head is like, why is anybody going to hire me to produce anything? This goes way back. And this might be for people who are interested in producing or writing or directing and just don't know how to get in. I didn't know what to do. And I spent a lot of time talking to squirrels in Central Park in the early years about how do I make myself different? Why is anybody going to hire me as opposed to any other schmuck out there that wants to be a producer? And when I started writing and directing, I did that intentionally because I said, I'll understand the problems that the writer has. I'll understand the problems that the director has. And as opposed to just saying to them, well, we have 5 hours left to shoot and we're done, I could go in and say, look, this is the problem we have. And, this is how we could solve it. And this is one way to solve it. It's not the only way to solve it, but it might just work. And so that's really why I got into writing and directing. But it made me, I think, a better producer because I understood the problems and can respond to specifics as opposed to just, acting silly as a lot of producers do and bellyache about, oh, we're going to close you down in 5 hours. Well, that doesn't help anybody. That just puts more pressure on the poor guy that's directing who's trying to do the best job he possibly can.
So when you and Alan are working on your scripts with the producer mindset, are you able to kind of apply that as well, kind of like thinking about what the sort of budget is going to be like? Do you go into the writing with that sort of thing in mind?
Well, it was a given that the budget was a specific amount of money for each episode, and we didn't have a penny more. That was a given. And we also had a time schedule. We had 5 days to shoot the show, and that was a given. So we would write them to accommodate the money and to accommodate the time schedule. And if we wrote it and we boarded it out and it was too long, then we would have to rewrite it and figure out how to get it into the number of days we had to shoot the episodes. We made 93 episodes, half hours. Nope, we never went over budget. We never went over time. And that was people look at me and they go, oh, how'd you do that? Well, there was no genius to it. It was really just, these were the limitations we had. And nobody wanted to hear, oh, it's a great episode, but we need another $5,000 or $50,000. No one was there to talk to. You just said, okay, that's the deal. So everybody, including myself and Alan, we wrote, the guys who wrote Tales from the Crypt, wrote them so that they could be shot in 5 days. And every director, I would have a long talk with them on, before we even got close to hiring them, whether it be Billy Friedkin or John Frankenheimer or anybody else who directed. And I would say, look, we shoot them in 5 days. I'm going to show you a board, and it's for 5 days. And if you don't think you can shoot that in 5 days, you got to tell me now. Don't tell me on day 3, because I'll fire you. I promise you, I'll fire you, and I'll finish it, or I'll get somebody else to finish it. But suffice it to say, every episode will be shot in the 5 days that we have allocated. And everybody was very respectful of that. I mean, everyone said, oh, Billy Friedkin, he'll never do it. He'll tell you, Billy was great. We were very straight with each other, and we got along like gangbusters. And he shot his episode, and it was one of the better ones in 5 days.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think part of it is letting everybody know what the parameters, what you're trying to accomplish. What are those parameters, and let them know you're there to help. You're not there to hurt. You're there to help. You're not enemies. You're making the same project.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at how many people I know. They say, well, what do you do first as a producer? And I go, well, I guess the first thing I do when I'm looking for a director is let them read the script, and then and then I say, okay, let's talk about what's in the script for you. What's important for you? What's not important for you? How do you see these characters? So that I can make a determination. Are we talking about making the same movie? Mm-hmm. Because nothing's more punishing than you hire somebody, you think everything's going great, and on day 3 or day 4, you go, Jesus Christ, this guy's not making the same movie that I'm making.
Yeah.
That's the worst place to be. So you want to make sure that's not happening. So, every project I've done, even with some big directors, first question I have and the first conversation I have is, okay, so why do you like this script? What's in it that makes you excited? And to see if I share those desires to fix and make those things happen on the film.
So having gone from producing and working on different shows and everything in television, then it was around that time, then you also made the transition over to film. And from what I remember in our discussion, one of the first things you were doing in film with Alan as your partner was turning Children of the Corn from just a one shot into what would eventually become a long running franchise. Now, people can, the simple fact is it's still going today, and it's going because that first sequel is what really got it going. Can you tell our friends here a little bit about that process, about getting into that genre?
Sure. It was crazy. One day the phone rang, and these guys who had Corn said, we want you guys to write it. And we were like, well, you already have a good franchise. What do you need us for? And they said, well, you do Tales from the Crypt. And so we said, well, we'll think about it if we come up with an idea. So we came up with an idea, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And I was supposed to produce it as well as write it with Alan. Mm-hmm. And then I couldn't because I was busy doing something for Warner Brothers. And so they went ahead and made it without us, but they used our script. More interesting, perhaps, for our people tuning into this, is before all of that, and before Freddy's, before Freddy's, and even before, except for the plays, I made a movie called with Sarah Lawrence College students and Brian De Palma, Home Movies. Mm-hmm. And we made that movie for $350,000. We made it on the Sarah Lawrence campus. We were able to sell it foreign for $500,000, domestic to United Artists for $500,000. So we made money before we even finished the movie. Kirk Douglas was in it, and he was one of our investors. Mm-hmm. Steven Spielberg was an investor, brought in by Brian. Mm-hmm. George Lucas was an investor, brought in by Brian. And I was running around New York City looking for writers, actually lawyers and doctors and anybody else who I thought might have money to put into the picture, because Brian was coming up with half the money and I was coming up with half the money. And so that was it was the first movie I ever made. I lived on campus in the production office, which was not air conditioned in the summertime when we were shooting, and I slept on a cot. And that was the first, you learn really quickly when you're on your feet like that and you don't have a lot of money and you've got somebody like Kirk Douglas and Brian De Palma directing, you learn very quickly what you need to do and how you need to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was during the time when you were teaching over at Hunter College, correct?
Yeah, I was teaching at Hunter College and Brian was teaching at Sarah Lawrence, and we met socially, we combined the classes, and we taught for a whole season in his apartment and my apartment every Saturday for the whole day. and we went over the script and we laid it out and we outlined it and we talked about writing, and you would write scene 1 and then we would talk about that, and then the following week another student would rewrite scene 1 and you would rewrite scene 8. And after 2 semesters of this, we said, well, goodbye and good luck. And our 15 students said, wait a second, you've been telling us all along, if you want to learn to make a movie, make a movie. We have a script. We want to make this. So Brian and I looked at each other, gulped hard, and said, right, okay, let's go make it. And that was my first movie. Brian had already done, he was a very successful director. By then, he had done Carrie and he had done The Fury. So he was pretty much up there, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue to a couple of the questions that have been coming in. The first one, since we were talking about how you got started, how everything has been going since then, we are going to get into from like the mid '90s and beyond. But before that, some of our students here are asking. First question is, are you currently looking for projects, and if so, what are you looking for?
I'm always looking for good.
Mm-hmm.
I would do a good horror movie. I would do a good thriller. Yes, I'm very active. I finished a movie last year in Australia with Bill Nighy. Because of COVID, it's taking a little bit longer, but we're just finishing that movie up. I have another movie with Bill Nighy, and again, because of COVID, now we're talking about not shooting until the 3rd or 4th quarter. It needs to be shot in Spain, which is having terrible problems with COVID. Mm-hmm. That's a family comedy drama. I've just made an offer to Isabella Rossellini to play his wife.
Excellent.
And I have 2 TV shows that we're about to go out to streamers with. So I'm very active. I just optioned a book recently. I have a writer writing, and we have weekly conversations about that. So yes, I'm actively looking for stuff. I'm looking for good. I would do a good comedy, a good horror, a good whatever. After I did all the big tentpoles for the studios, I took a look at my career and thought, am I really happy doing what I'm doing? I mean, yes, it's great work. It's a lot of work. It's good money. But, I go to see The King's Speech, or I go to see the movie about Stephen Hawkins, or I go to see Slumdog Millionaire, and I go, how come I didn't get those scripts? Why didn't somebody give me those scripts? And so I started thinking, I want to get into that more. Sorry for the ringing. There's a phone in the background. So I decided I wanted to do things a little bit differently, and I stopped doing the big tentpole pictures and started developing some of these smaller, more intimate, more movies that meant more to me.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I'm doing now. Would I do another tentpole? In a minute, if I loved it. If I found a great script that I loved, I would do it. But right now, my focus is really on those smaller pictures that have great impact emotionally. Mm-hmm. And I think the difference between, and I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but forgive me for that, but I think the big difference in movies today, and even in television, really revolves around character and relationship. I can blow up a building just as good or just as bad as anybody else. So the visual effects and the effects don't really cut it. That's not the difference. What's the difference is, in my opinion, is that the characters, the relationships, and how they react to each other. So whatever I do, whether they're big pictures or little pictures, the budgets don't really have any effect on me because I've been lucky enough to make very, very big budgeted pictures and also very small pictures. So I'm only really interested in is this a movie that I would want to go see, or a TV show that I would want to go see? Mm-hmm. Is this something that I think is worthy of an audience? Yeah. I don't really look at it from, can I sell it? And I think that's sort of a big mistake. If you think you can sell it, I think that's the wrong motivation, because that changes from day to day. And it's like if you see a horror movie from 5 years ago, even, or 10 years ago, and you go, I want to make a horror movie like that. You might be able to do that, but I think today, because of the recent horror movies that have come out that have something more than just, I'm going to scare you, they have some social relevance, have some relationship to character, even of today's young people. I think you have to do more than just say, oh, I'm going to scare the hell out of you and get away with it. I think you really have to have a horror movie, for example, that maybe has some redeeming qualities about what life is all about or what relationship is all about.
Gotcha.
Like Get Out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a perfect choice. That's a perfect example right there. Now, it sounds a lot like what you're looking for is really kind of like, you know, one singular story at a time that really appeals to you. These days, it seems like every studio is trying to get a shared universe going of some sort. Have you ever thought about? You just
froze. Could you repeat that question? I'm not hearing you.
Oh, sure. Can you hear me now?
You're frozen.
How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. These days, a lot of studios are doing all the different shared universe projects. They're trying to basically just kind of duplicate the success that Marvel has had. And so, have you thought about doing any sort of like series or shared universe or anything like that? Or are you just focusing on like the one-off stories right now?
Well, when I'm dealing mainly with streamers, because I think that's really the future. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking for projects that I can sell to streamers, but have relevance to me in terms of projects that I would like to see. I don't see myself going into the Marvel universe or the Superman DC universe, but I am developing a series of horror movies to be shot in India, because I was approached from a group in India, and they said, if you put your name on a script, you have a big following in India. I mean, who knew, right? Yeah. But they liked that idea, and I said, well, I would only do that if I loved the scripts. I have to love the scripts, and so they said, okay, well let's start looking for scripts from Indian writers, but also from Western writers. And I said, fine, I'm just looking for good. Mm-hmm. And so, that's something that I'm interested in doing. But I'm also interested in doing, Slumdog. I'm interested in doing The King's Speech, which is one of the best pictures I've seen in recent years. Yeah. And so I'm very eclectic. I'm all over the place. I've done a lot of horror, but that's not what I'm limited to. We've done some action, but that's not what I'm limited to.
Right. So how do you prefer to be presented with something that is potentially good? Are you looking at a pitch, a log line, a spec script, or just like, I think, I remember we discussed this actually like right at the end of our first conversation, where you were mainly looking for synopses. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the synopsis need to be complete. Synopsis, you should look at it and say, I know nothing about this synopsis. Does this synopsis tell the reader everything they need to know, mainly about the tone, the characters, and the relationships? Because really, everything else can be changed. Yeah. But what's going to be attractive to someone like me are those things. What's the tone? What's the relationship? Who are the characters? And all the stuff with the streamers, for example, that I'm developing. Really, that's what we're working on. Yes, there's a story. Yes, there's a full complement of what happens. But what happens is easier to change if you really like these characters or understand these characters or want to spend time with these characters, whether good or bad. You don't have to make a judgment. I don't mind spending time with bad characters. Nasty characters. But as long as they're really top of the line nasty characters, So it's really rather than spend a lot of time reading, many scripts and really looking for that needle in a haystack, it's really synopsis and hitting all the beats in that synopsis.
Nice, very nice. And are there any sort of ideas or something that you're coming up with as well that you would think, wow, I need like a different writer to kind of take that? Can you hear me? Is that helping?
Yeah, I look everywhere. I deal with book publishers. I look at magazine articles. Like everybody else. Mm-hmm. You never know where you're going to find a good writer. You never know where you're going to find a good story. I used to teach a writing class at Columbia 100 years ago when Milos Forman ran it. And I would say to kids, graduate students at film at Columbia, I would say, this isn't a trick question, but what's the difference between you and Robert Towne?
Mm.
Robert Towne wrote Chinatown and won an Academy Award.
Right.
And they would be like, wow, what's the difference between you? And I would say, this isn't one screenplay. If you write the next Chinatown, guess what? Next year, you become Robert Towne.
Yeah.
So you never know where you're going to find good material. And that's part of the fun. That's part of the quest, to find good writers and good material.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do.
And so how can writers reach out to you to potentially write a script?
Let me think about that a little bit, because I don't really have a big organization. My wife is the head of development, and it's really just the two of us, and we keep it small because we want to keep it small. I don't really have any desire to make, everything in the world. I just have the desire to make things that I find interesting or exciting, or that I can get a feeling that, gee, I'd love to see this. So how best to do it? Maybe sending it to you, George, or maybe sending it to Angie.
While some more questions come in, can we talk a little bit about the time during the mid-90s when you were talking about during the time when you were part of the group to take Tales from the Crypt from TV to the big screen?
Yes, it was a natural progression for us to do it. It was just a question of the script, and then we did one with Ernest Dickerson, the first one, and then the partners decided I should direct the second one, and Alan and I should write the script, and so that's how that came about. And that was
from an old Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale script, right?
Yeah, when they were in college at USC, they wrote a script called Bordello of Blood, and they basically, Universal said they would like us to rewrite it and that I should direct it.
And as a fan, I had so much fun watching that movie too. I'd sold a lot of friends on it and everything, just telling them about the centerpiece of it all, which is Dennis Miller running around a bordello filled with vampires, spraying holy water from a super soaker while Ballroom Blitz plays in the background. How could you not love this? So that was the one thing that I always just said. It was just just watch it. You're going to have a blast with it. And all of my friends that did had, they had that same sort of sense of fun to it, which is something that I really incorporate with a lot of your projects. It really is that really good sense of fun, and it's something that, do you feel like that's something that that is missing from a lot of projects?
I think times have changed a little bit. I think it's more difficult to marry comedy with horror.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fans are a bit more sophisticated today, and they really want to get deeper into character and deeper into relevance in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's what we always tried to do. I was thinking when you said, you always try to bring some kind of comedy or humor into the projects that you've made. And I immediately went to Valkyrie for some reason.
Okay, not all of them, I will say. And, that one is, that one was a very interesting departure too from what you had done before, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, it was a huge departure.
Yeah. And one of my favorite stories from our first conversation was how you got involved with Superman. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? Because that was supposed to be the springboard to a lot more Superman projects. Obviously, that wound up not being the case, but there was a definite start of a full-on direction that they were going to go with this. And the way that they kind of dovetailed off of Superman 1 and 2 was a really interesting touch as well, which a lot of films these days are doing right now, with Godzilla from 2014 being as an indirect sequel to the original 1954 one, and then you have Jurassic World kind of starting its own franchise. And tell us a little bit about getting involved with Superman.
Well, it was kind of an odd situation. I was finishing up Constantine, and I had about, I think, 3 weeks more to shoot on Constantine on the lot at Warner Brothers. And I get my assistant comes over and says, Alan Horn and Jeff Robinoff want to see you in the office right away. I'm thinking, that's odd. I'm shooting. No, they want to see you now. Because I said, I'll get there. I'll come over when we break for lunch. No, they want to see you now. So I'm walking over to their offices thinking, they're going to fire me. I did something wrong. I don't know what I did wrong, but they're going to can me. So by the time I get to their office, I'm like very defensive, and I walk in and I said, listen, I don't know what I did, but it's really wrong to fire me now. We only have 3 more weeks to shoot. So you should let me finish this movie. And then if you don't want to ever use me again or talk to me about getting off the lot, that's what you should do. And they look at me like I'm from Mars, and they go, what are you talking about? Sit down. And I sit down, and they go, well, we want to talk about your next movie. And I went, oh. I tried to make it like it was a joke what I just said, but it fell flat. And I said, oh, what do you mean? And they said, well, we'd like you to read this script. And they turned the script around and pushed it over to my side of the desk, and it said on it, Flyby. And I said, Flyby?
And that's the J.J. Abrams one, right?
And I said, what's Flyby? And they said, Flyby. And I said, no, I don't know Flyby. And they said, Superman. And I said, Superman, I'm not making Superman because you've been trying to make this for 10 years. You're never going to make it. I'm going to waste a year of my life trying to develop this more with you. You're going to pay me. I'll make some money, but it'll be a waste of a year of my life. At the end of the day, I'll feel terrible. And they said, no. And then we're going to make it. We're going to make it. I said, no. I got to go back to Constantine. No, thank you, but no. And the next day they called me back into the room, and they said, okay, so we figured out a way where, if I hit certain benchmarks, the movie would be greenlit. However, the only stopping gap, which I felt I had no right to even ask, was who's going to play Superman. I mean, it's their money. It's a big studio. It's a big budgeted movie. They're going to tell me who's going to play Superman. I'll be part of that decision, but it's going to be their decision, appropriately so. But they said, we really want to make this movie. And that's sort of how I got involved in it. And I first worked on it with Brett Ratner for about 2 weeks, and then he got fired. And then McGee was going to do it for about a year. Mm-hmm. And then finally Bryan Singer.
Yeah. And so I just got a 7-minute warning here for today. This has already been flying by, even with our little technical difficulties every now and then. But I wanted to get a really good question.
How about any more questions? Are there any more questions?
There's one more. There's this one is, are old school anthologies coming back into production where each episode is not related to other episodes? And this question also asks, why are monster creatures not in popularity versus ghost stories and mentally ill characters?
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Sounds like a good question, but I didn't hear it. You froze.
Oh, the first part is, are old school anthologies coming back into production?
Yes. I didn't hear the question, but I just heard about anthologies, and I think these things have a sort of a sine curve to them. Everyone wants to do anthologies, and then they go, oh no, we've had enough of anthologies. They have to have recurring characters and recurring relationships, and we want to segue from one to the other each episode. And now it's coming back the other way. So, I think right now, for me, it's about good material and what's the best way to tell the story. Yeah. I don't think you can pre-assess, I don't want to look at it because it's an anthology, or I want to look at it because it's an anthology. I think the material demands what it demands for the storytelling. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the other part of the question is asking, why are monster creatures not in popularity instead of ghost stories or mentally ill characters?
That's a good question. I don't know. I suspect because, like with visual effects, everybody can do them now, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Mm-hmm. So they no longer make the difference if I want to see a movie or not. The audience doesn't go, I really want to see that guy Freddy Krueger. as opposed to I want to see Chucky.
Right.
They want to see now characters that relate to them, and so it's no longer the visual effect, and it's no longer the special effect. It's really the character.
Right. Gotcha. It looks like we're right about the tail end. So before I put out my last question, let me throw it out to everyone to reach out to me. You can reach out to me at georgehsirois@gmail.com, and that's spelled SIROIS. I have it in the chat window if you guys want to take a look at it.
I'm not hearing
you. You can also access the full 90-minute conversation I had with Gilbert on my podcast, Excelsior Journeys. So I would say my last question to you, Gil, is what sort of tips do you have for the up-and-coming screenwriter in these days? This is a very different kind of time that we're living in right now, with movie theaters, really suffering from COVID and streaming services really picking up. What are your thoughts about what are your pieces of advice you can give to up-and-coming screenwriters in this time?
A couple of things. First of all, perseverance. You just got to keep writing or directing or producing or whatever it is. You just got to keep doing it. Perseverance is the main thing. If you can do anything else, I would say do it, because it's a tough business and it's a tough life. But once you have that perseverance, that's the main thing. And then just keep doing it. If you're a writer, you got to write every day. If you're holding down a job, so then you write from 6 to 8 in the morning before you go to work, or you write from 9 to midnight at night. But you have to have the discipline to do that. And, my attitude is cream always rises to the top. And if you keep at it and if you keep doing it, you're going to get better and better at it. And that's the main thing. Just keep working at it. And eventually you'll get there. I mean, when I started out, I had no relationship to anybody. My father owned a store in Yonkers, New York, a floor covering store where I learned how to put down floors. I knew nobody in the film or TV business, but you just keep pushing and pushing and working, and eventually your stuff will start happening. I think that's really the best advice I can give anybody.
Excellent. And I couldn't thank you enough for bringing me aboard on this. I had a great time despite the technical difficulties, and I hope you had as good a time as well.
He did.
I did. Thank you so much. And Jeff, I don't see you, but I hope you can hear me. Thank you for setting this up, and I really appreciate it. And good luck to all of you young filmmakers or older filmmakers out there that are looking to keep doing it, because that's the way you do it. You just got to keep doing it.
And before you guys go, Gil, you've seen this before. You saw this with the Australians a couple days ago. Thank you so much.
Uh-oh. I don't have.
If you didn't see that, Gil, it was the monkey.
Yeah, I did see it.
All right. Well,
Did you replace the batteries?
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. My head is exploding with all the stuff we have learned today. It's been absolutely wonderful.